Raft of Stars by Andrew J. Graff is the most saccharine, least offensive, and most allegorical book I've read in a long time. It also happens to be pretty good. I just have one major problem with it.
Join our hands together and we'll sink in quicksand. Run it out together till we misunderstand. Adopt a life of silence on a trim scrap of land, or reconsider living on the other hand.
Hey friends, thanks for watching Gronsky Books, and I really mean that. In the last week or so, this small channel of mine has grown an awful lot. I am very grateful to everybody who subscribed and everybody who's taken the time to watch my videos in the last couple of weeks. It's really meant a lot to me. It's very encouraging. So thank you for helping my channel grow. Anyway, without further ado, today we are talking about Raft of Stars by Andrew J. Graff. Did I say Graft? It's Graff. G-R-A-F-F. Graff. Sorry. Graff teaches creative writing at Wittenberg University in Springfield, Ohio. He received his MFA at the prestigious Iowa Writers Workshop, and at the time of this video, Raft of Stars, published in 2021, is his only published novel. According to his publisher, Graff is a veteran of Afghanistan, and he grew up in the Northwoods of Wisconsin, where Raft of Stars is set. I just realized I haven't even shown you the book yet. Hold on. I've got it right here. Sorry about that. Now, Raft of Stars is a lot of things. Andrew Graff squeezed a lot of very writerly themes into the 304 pages of this novel. But chief among them is the coming-of-age tale, the classic coming-of-age tale. I hope you can see this okay. I've got my light set up and it's got the laminate cover. This is a library copy. I don't own a copy of this book. And can we just pause for a second and acknowledge that libraries exist and it's okay to check books out from the library? I watch a lot of book review videos on YouTube and very few people hold up books in front of the camera that have, you know, the library stickers on them, you know, but I'm proud to be a library patron, by gosh. Anyway, let's normalize the library on BookTube. What do you say? Let's all be proud patrons of the library. There are 6 principal characters in Raft of Stars, and they all reside in or around the fictional town of Clay Pot, Wisconsin. There are a small number of side characters that sort of fill in the corners of this book, but really this book is about 6 people. It's almost exclusively these 6 characters. So I'm going to give you a quick rundown of these characters here. The 2 mainest of the main characters are 10-year-old boys named, get this, Dale Breadwin and Fisher, I forgot his name. They go by Fish and Bread. And here, just let me complain about this for a second, because this lazy reference to Jesus Christ's most famous miracle is, and I've said it before in other videos, but it is about as subtle as a sledgehammer to the face. It was as if Graff worried that his frequent references to prayer and faith weren't enough to tip readers off to the fact that this is a Christian allegory. And he had to go one step further, and he named his principal protagonists after the loaves and the fishes. Even if Fish and Bread were believable nicknames, this is about as lazy a metaphor as I've read since John Irving named the family dog Sorrow in Hotel New Hampshire. And then he kills the dog off and they get it taxidermied and they spring sorrow on each other. I'm like, hit me over the head one more time, why don't you? Right? Come on. Fish and Bread? Oh, okay. That was hard for me to get past, but I'm glad that I did, because Raft of Stars has a lot more to offer than insultingly bad metaphors. Now, in my intro, I said I had one big problem with this book, but that metaphor ain't it. I'll get to my problem in just a second. Anyway, Fish and Bread commit what they think is an unforgivable crime, and so they go on the run together. They go out into the woods, and they go downriver, and their ultimate destination is the army base where Fish's dad is stationed, about 100 miles away. Raft of Stars is set just after the Gulf War in the mid-90s, and these boys idolize soldiers, and they think their only salvation is the army base. Okay, so the next set of characters we follow are Sheriff Cal and Teddy, Fish's grandfather. When the boys light out for the territories, Teddy and Sheriff Cal team up to bring the boys back home. This is a great duo. Sheriff Cal sort of shoulders the responsibility of the search party, while Teddy has all the ingenuity and backcountry know-how to actually carry the search party out. As they crisscross the river's shoreline and navigate the dense forest, Teddy imparts riding lessons and wilderness experience lessons to Sheriff Cal, while Sheriff Cal worries about the boys but also bemoans his woeful life. Each of these things sort of in equal measure. See, Sheriff Cal really does see his life as woeful. He's a 35-year-old alcoholic who lost his previous job at a larger police station in Texas, and he was forced to go out to the sticks in Wisconsin, and now he's on the search party where he's forced to sober up cold turkey. And on this little adventure in the woods, Sheriff Cal encounters nothing but endless streams of frustration and struggle. And through all this, I find this a little odd. Sheriff Cal doesn't swear one single time. Now, I'm not saying I need a lot of harsh language in my books, but this novel is trying to depict an alcoholic in the very first stages of recovery. How about a little realism? More on Sheriff Cal's alcoholism in a minute. We're going to move on. The dynamic between Teddy and Sheriff Cal offered some of the best flavor in this novel. I really liked both of these characters, and I reveled in their banter as the natural conflicts between them arose, while at the same time their common goals kept them together. It's really good stuff. Okay, so then rounding out our 6 major players are Tiffany, a local storekeeper, and Miranda, Fisher's mother. Tiffany is a poet, and she has survived a bout of homelessness. She's built a new life for herself. And she's also fallen in love with Sheriff Cal. Miranda is a woman of a deep, abiding Christian faith, and is also a woman of action and cannot sit still as other people take up the task of looking for her son. So through a series of circumstances, Tiffany and Miranda team up, and they too go off in search of the boys in the forest. Tiffany and Miranda are also a great duo because they are mirrors of one another. While Miranda is a woman of deep faith, Tiffany is irreverent. Yet they find that they have a lot of affection for one another, and a bond forms between them that feels very real. And thus the stage is set. 6 people navigating Wisconsin's North Woods in a race against time. I don't know what I'm doing. It's like after midnight and I'm alone in my house, so I guess I'm just feeling a little loopy. Anyway, I don't want to say too much about it, but family ties are really key here in Raft of Stars. There are a lot of thematic elements in Raft of Stars, and I'm not going to bother trying to go into them all, but many of them do heavily involve the bonds of family, for better or worse. Bread and Fish knelt in the morning sun next to the riverbank with their supplies laid out on a tarp. The dew on the grass soaked the knees of Fish's jeans, but it didn't bother him. It couldn't. They'd need to get used to discomforts from here on out. The damp and dirt, maybe hunger too. They were in the wild. It surprised Fish how unshaken Bread seemed this morning after what happened the night before. But then Fish felt less shaken too. Here they were at their favorite spot on the river, a whole mess of bushcrafting supplies before them, and they were going to build a raft and name it and take it downriver with poles. The water slid between islands and toppled over boulders. A finch sat in a tree and watched, cocked its small eye towards the boys. Yesterday was a dream. Today was a good time. They could do this. This book was obviously written by a creative writing professor. As I said in the intro, Graff teaches creative writing at the university level. It seems to me that he used every trick in the book to craft this novel. Craft is the right word. It feels more carefully crafted than artfully written. And that's not disparaging the book at all. I'm not trying to disparage the writer in the slightest. A lot of good books are crafted. And I think the word craft gets a bad rap in writing circles. And I didn't do this, and please don't ask me to, but I probably could have gone through the novel beginning to end and dissected it into its exact parts to track the formula that was used to create this novel. And I probably could have done it with ease. The beats of this novel come like a drum. One thing happens, the next 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 thing happens. The pacing is perfect. The internal scene-by-scene construction is perfect. All the little architectural things that go into a novel are just exacting. You could not go through this novel and cut any fluff. If an element of the book exists in the book, it will come back and matter later. There are no superfluous characters. There are no superfluous details. Everything has weight. Everything represents something. It is almost too perfect. This perfect setup and payoff formula isn't so much a complaint as it is just sort of a recognition that Graff knows his stuff, and he didn't leave anything that he ever learned about writing a novel out of this book. He wrote a novel that he could probably assign as a textbook in his own classrooms. This isn't really a criticism, even if it does sound like a backwards compliment. I mean, the book is written a little too tight. It's a little too polished. It reminds me a little of when I was in the military and we were encouraged to polish our boots and starch our uniforms. You know, put that nice crease in the sleeve there. And did we look tight? Did we look like the commander's shiny little pennies? Well, yeah, we did. We looked good, but like I always felt a little weird polishing combat boots to a high gloss shine and starching camo.
What in God's holy name are you blathering about?
Okay, let me just talk about Sheriff Cal's alcoholism for a minute. Andrew Graff clearly wasn't interested in writing a realistic depiction of alcoholism in this novel. Alcoholism was just another trait one of his characters had to overcome for the sake of a plot. Another miracle. And that is the one big problem I have with this book. Cal is in Wisconsin as a last chance lawman. 35 years old. Too young for acid reflux and gray hair, so you'd think he'd be too young for last chances. Back in Houston, his drinking was already very well known in the department. And when his drinking led to the intentional brutalization of a domestic violence suspect, his higher-ups kicked him out of the department and shipped him off to Wisconsin, some snowy outpost where a bleeding heart can live out the rest of his days in solitude. Now, at the time that Fish and Bread disappear, Sheriff Cal's been on the job in Clay Pot, Wisconsin for less than a year. So he's really not all that far removed from the episode that got him fired. And so now, when Cal has his first bad night in the woods, he resolves to never drink again, and he pours his travel whiskey bottle out into the river, and he howls at the moon. Did you see that? His grand gesture. This moment is meant as a dramatic turning point in Cal's life. But after that moment, Cal behaves as if he's never been an alcoholic a day in his life. He spends more time thinking about maybe finding a new line of work. Maybe he'll take up farming. But very rarely do his thoughts return to alcohol, and when they do, they're just of a very cursory nature, and it doesn't seem to affect his behavior in the slightest. Now, one of two scenarios seems likely here. One, Andrew Graff wanted to keep this book on the lighter side. And the novel as Christian allegory probably doesn't lend itself to a lot of hard-hitting sequences of realistic internal suffering. Or 2, Andrew Graff has never met an alcoholic and has no idea what booze does to a person when they lose control over it. Which I don't believe for a second. I don't believe there are many adults living in the world today who don't know or haven't at least met in a meaningful way at least one person suffering from alcoholism. So we're going to go with option 1. Raft of Stars is too soft a book to hit hard on the white-knuckle recovery front. And okay. The reason I have a problem with this is because alcoholism is a trait given to the biggest character in the book outside the 2 boys. Cal is the adult we're supposed to identify most with in this book. The fallible man in a situation where he's in over his head, and he relies on internal fortitude, help from others, and maybe a little external strength from above to see him through. I would be fine with that premise, except that it paints over alcoholism's harshest effects on the mind, body, and soul. Mind, body, and soul. These are not insignificant things. Cal kicks the habit in one night. In one moment, howling at the moon. He didn't stop drinking when he assaulted a suspect and lost his job. So why would he stop drinking now? If this book was being honest, he wouldn't kick the habit so easily, even if now was the moment that he chose. And he wouldn't do it without a lot of hard work, support, dedication to self-love, and the recovery process. Graff made it look too easy. And see, this is important to me. I've known people who have lost their lives to alcoholism. I know they had moments of clarity. I know they wanted to stop. But wanting to stop in a bad moment is rarely enough to see somebody through to serious sobriety. Not without all that other hard work and dedication to recovery and healing and self-love and all that other stuff. And to paint a picture that giving up alcohol for an alcoholic is as easy as giving up chewing gum leaves a dangerously inaccurate impression in the reader, especially younger readers who might not know any better. Okay, there. I've made my point. I'm done talking about this. That was the one big thing that didn't sit right with me in this book. Moving on. The third of the book that's dedicated to fish and bread remind me a little of my life when I was 10 years old. That is, if I'd been raised by a single parent and if I'd committed an unforgivable crime and if I'd gone running down the river Huckleberry Finn style. But I was a 90s kid. And I had a single friend at that age. His name was Joe. Bread and fish remind me a lot of Joe and me. We had adventures. We told each other lies, but we were fiercely loyal to one another. We thought that watching the Gulf War on CNN was just as good as going to the movie theater. But what did we know? We didn't have a movie theater in my town until I was like 15 or 16. So admittedly, there were a lot of nostalgic scenes kind of thrown my way in this book. From deciding who gets to carry the Barlow knife and floating down the river, and even their culinary adventure, the red worm stew. It's the best part of the book. And if you know, you know. But at one point, the narrator in the book says, fish was the fuse and bread was the match. Or maybe it was the other way around. And that rings true, because sometimes I was the fuse and Joe was the match. And sometimes Joe was the fuse and I was the match. Graff really nailed the kind of relationship 2 10-year-old boys might have shared with each other in the 90s in a small rural town. Now, Joe and I didn't sail down the river on a raft, but we did float on the river. He lived right on a river, and we would play in the river all the time. And sometimes it flooded, and we'd play in flood water. Like, how stupid is that? Like, we were reckless. We were crazy kids. We played with just total abandon. And growing up in that quasi-rural setting, and Joe lived on the edge of town, and so when we'd go out and play, sometimes we'd range out for miles, and we'd be out in the woods or we'd be out by the river in the valley somewhere, and thunderstorms would come in and we'd get stranded in the storms. Now this book, Raft of Stars, some of the most powerful scenes in this book take place during thunderstorms. And the power of these storms and the way that man is pitted against nature in these books, it's the ultimate foe and also the ultimate ally and to become one with these things and to harness it for yourself and to tame it with your own works, with your own resolve. It's communicating with something bigger than you. It's the nature of prayer, which is a central theme in this book. Even if you're not a religious person, you can find a lot of value in the emotional struggles that these characters go through. So yes, despite my complaints, I really enjoyed Raft of Stars, and I recommend it to anybody who likes coming-of-age tales, whether you're a Christian or not, but especially if you are a Christian. I actually read this book for the first time when it came out in 2021, and I just finished reading it again a couple weeks ago. And I've recommended it to a lot of people in my personal life, and now I'm recommending it to you, even if it is a little too perfect. All right, that's all I got. Thanks again for all your support. It really means a lot to me, and I'm gonna keep on making these videos for as long as I can. I'm starting a new job next week. Hopefully that doesn't get in the way of my video production schedule. Hopefully it doesn't get in the way of my reading and my writing and all the other things that I want to do in my life. But I don't think it will. I'm actually really looking forward to it. So I'm going to see you guys in the next one. There's a spider crawling across my floor. Get a dog, little doggy. It'll be fine.